بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I praise Allah as He deserves to be praised, and I ask Him to send His peace and His blessings upon His last and beloved Prophet Muhammad, His family members, His companions, and all of those who followed His way of life. I apologize earlier trying to get online with the camera and all of that, so I was not able to get a good view here. But Alhamdulillah, now everything is okay. As we promised earlier through our announcement on Facebook and on my personal announcement, we thought of starting a new initiation, which is commenting on the book of Imam Ghazali called Minhaj al-Abidin. So before we start with the book, I'm going to mention to you a few things. First, today we're going to talk a little bit about the life of Imam Ghazali, and then later on we're going to talk about we'll just do an introduction to his book Minhaj al-Abidin. And then probably, inshallah, in future sessions, we can go on and talk more about the details and the chapters. So, first of all, we know, and because we have heard many talk about Imam Ghazali, he was a genius. He was one of the most recognized, influential scholars of the Muslim world. He lived in the year 1000 to 1100. As a matter of fact, he was born in the year 1056, and then he died in the year 1111. So this is a very easy year to remember his passing away. Again, 1111, 1111, easy to remember. So just hearing the fact that he lived during that time, we understand that he lived in a time when the Islamic world was very well advanced. Advanced in different aspects, not only religiously, but also when it comes to civilization. You are talking about a time when Muslims were present in Andalusia, and when we talk about Andalusia, we are reminded of doctors, a civilization that was great. We're talking about the days of Baghdad, during the time when different sciences were flourishing. Not only Islamic sciences, but different sciences were flourishing. So pretty much it's the Islamic golden age. So Imam Ghazali was raised during that time, and he was lucky enough, with the grace of God, to be one of the students of Imam al-Juwayni. Now, Imam al-Juwayni is a very important figure in Islamic tradition, because he is well known to be a scholar of the Islamic creed. He is well known to be an usuli, somebody who dwelled deep into the into the legal theory of the Islamic jurisprudence. And he was very famous at his time, and his books are being read nowadays too, all over the Islamic world, and not only. So Imam Ghazali had a true mentor, had a very powerful, very learned person to really teaching him Islam and establish on him some very sound foundations. Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala was a product of the prayer of his father. His father was not a learned man. I would consider him as an average person, but he loved the scholars, and he also loved knowledge as well. And he used to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him a son that is going to be a faqih. Now, faqih, when we're using this technical term, fiqh or faqih, we're referring here to the Islamic jurisprudence, not only Islamic jurisprudence, but also to the Islamic understanding of things. So he wanted him to be somebody who was a person who had a great understanding of religion in general, but also fiqh as well. So he was a very sincere person. According to the books of history, the biography, it is mentioned that he himself would not eat from other people's food except from what his own hands would produce. In other words, he would raise vegetables and whatever in his backyard, and he would eat from his own hand, which is something really amazing. And this is in order to be cautious of what's out there, because we know that not everything that is out there or that is being offered to us is going to be pure and wholesome. So he was very careful of making sure that the blessings of God are coming from a pure source. Therefore, he assured, by having things that he would raise or grow with his own hands like that. Here is a great lesson for all of us nowadays to pay attention, because we live in a world that we don't know sometimes what we're eating. We go out there, we go to a restaurant, we think that is good, but we don't know how those individuals are treating their employees. We don't know how those individuals are earning that money and buying the food that is being served to you in front of you. So again, I'm not suggesting that we stop and we don't go anywhere, but I'm saying we have to be sensible to such a level where at least we understand and we know what kind of restaurant we're going to, or what kind of people are those who are serving the food. Are these known to be aggressors? Are these known to be unfair individuals? Are these known to be people who earn the money from haram sources, from prohibited sources, or what? So these are very essential questions that we have to live by. And the other thing too that we can learn from just the beginning right now is the fact that the father is looking to have his son become not only somebody who's righteous, but somebody who is very well equipped with the Islamic knowledge. And the reality of things nowadays is that we would pray to God for anything but that. Maybe not everybody, but many people. We pray, oh God, make my daughter or my son a doctor. Oh God, make my daughter or my son a wealthy person. Oh God, give him a righteous husband and a good husband and a wealthy husband and a wealthy wife or beautiful wife, or you name it. I mean, good family and all of that stuff, which is all good, but we're missing the most important thing, which is religion, which is, again, understanding about your faith. Prophet ﷺ, in a hadith, he is known to be said, "Man yuridillahu bihi khayran yufaqihu fid din." When God intends something good for an individual, he teaches that person religion, or he gives to that person a good understanding of religion. So these individuals, even though they lived centuries ago, they had their principles right. Nowadays, we have a lot of things in our hands. We live in a very advanced technological time, but unfortunately, we don't have our principles right. So these are great things to learn from the old generations. He was born in Tus. Tus was a province of nowadays Iran, and in that particular province there was another smaller place, or I would call it probably kind of a small city, or maybe a large neighborhood called Ghazal, and that's how Imam Ghazali received his name. Not only him, but many scholars throughout the Islamic history, they took the name of the place where they come from. For example, we're talking about Imam al-Bukhari. Imam al-Bukhari is not his real name, Bukhari, but that is the name from the place where he comes from. And the same scenario is with many other imams or reputable scholars throughout the Islamic history. So similarly, with Imam Ghazali, that's how he takes his name, from the place where he comes from. His name is Muhammad ibn Ahmad al-Ghazali al-Tusi al-Shafi'i. And according to these, we can understand that his father's name was Muhammad, his grandfather's name was Ahmed, and he was from Tus, he was from Ghazal, and he was also somebody who followed the school of jurisprudence Shafi'iyya. Now, Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala also received a very special title by the Islamic scholars. And this title is Hujjatul Islam. Hujjatul Islam means the evidence or the proof of Islam. Now, for somebody to be called Hujjatul Islam is really a big title. And this is not given except to those who are profound and exceptional scholars throughout the history. Imam Ghazali was also considered to be a mujaddid. Mujaddid is somebody who revives the religion of Allah, Islam, every 100 years. Not necessarily coming up with no rules and regulations on how to pray, and so we're not talking about the basics here or things that are unchangeable. We're talking about giving new nuances or making Islam more applicable, giving a new understanding of certain things based on time and the place, like no one else. And that's what Imam Ghazali did in his century. He gave an understanding of Islam to the others. He dived deep into the meanings of terms and concepts in Islam like no other scholar at his time did, and probably maybe a few throughout the Islamic history. So, if I have a deep appreciation for his work. I have a deep connection with Imam Ghazali too. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed me to have him in the chain of my sanad in my Islamic studies. I praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that as well. And I remember when I was, I think I was 15 years old when I was first studying the books of Imam Ghazali in Turkey with Sheikh Muhammad Ramadan, Allah hafadhu, in Istanbul. And I can show you this book right here. This is called Minhaj al-Abidin, and you can see that it is a very old book. It is published during the time of the Ottomans, and I don't know exactly how old, but based on the way how it is written and the quality of the paper, I can say that it is anywhere between 150 years old, maybe to even 200 to 300 years. And you can see on the side it is wrapped with a sheep leather right here, and so it's very old. It's something really precious that I studied with my sheikh. And Minhaj al-Abidin is a commentary on the Bidayatul Hidayah. Bidayatul Hidayah is another very famous book of Imam Ghazali, and usually it is a book that is being taught to students who are in their initial stages in Islamic sciences. And that was me back then, many years ago. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward our shuyukhs, all of our shuyukhs inshallah, because it is through them who we are really receiving these blessings, and also the ability to understand things in Islam. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also preserve and show mercy upon the blessed soul of Imam Ghazali as well. Let's move on here. Talking about Imam Ghazali's life, we mentioned that he was a student of Imam al-Juwayni, and he started teaching in a madrasa, in an institute or university, institute/university back in Baghdad, that was established by Nizam al-Mulk. Now, Nizam al-Mulk was like a governor back then in Baghdad, and he had a lot of knowledge as well, so we would consider him as a scholar as well. And he's the one who established this school, this madrasa / like I said, institute or university. And this was called the Nizamiya of Baghdad. The school was called Nizamiya of Baghdad, and it was a very special school for the fact that only the elect would be coming in that university or in that institute. And Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala, after learning and being equipped with tools to teach, he was 28 years old when he started teaching in Nizamiya of Baghdad. Now, a few years later, he had the ability to become the dean, the one in charge of the whole institute. Again, this shows how well qualified and equipped with necessary tools to not only teach but also to manage now. These things, they come into the surface. And in this school, I can mention a few names. Shahristani was among those scholars who was graduated, as a matter of fact, from this institute. Saadi Shirazi, who's very well known, famous, he's also graduated from the same school, and many other leaders too, not necessarily just scholars, but also big leaders, of the countries, of Muslim countries, that were graduated from that institute, Nizamiya of Baghdad. Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, he was a very well dedicated professor, and he taught so many students. During that time when he was there in Nizamiya, there were over 3,000 students, a big number, over 3,000 students. So he grew the number so big, and he was well known to be a person of aqidah, somebody who dealt with ilm al-kalam, with Islamic theology. He was a philosopher, even though he was not a big fan of many philosophers, but he had the ability to study philosophy, and wrote a book, which is a very famous book, called Tuhafat al-Falasifa. Now here in this book, after learning very well philosophy, he disagreed with many Muslim philosophers as well. And sometimes people, they think that Imam Ghazali rejected philosophy completely, and that is not true. He did not reject the philosophy completely, but he rejected some philosophers who were barely coping or barely fulfilling their responsibilities as Muslims, let alone as righteous people or as scholars, as Muslims. Yet at the same time, they were very well integrated with philosophy, and they were teaching it so much, and they were diving deep into the concepts of philosophy, and unfortunately they kind of got lost. And he was not a big fan of importing everything from the Greek philosophy, from the Hellenistic traditions or thoughts or philosophies. He was not a big fan of that. But again, if I can wrap it up, if I can say in a few sentences, Imam Ghazali's opinion on philosophy, I would say that it was more whatever it is acceptable according to our religion, and whatever. So using a word, whatever it's acceptable, may be very wide. It has a wide understanding, but I can narrow it down a little bit more by saying that as long as that philosophy is not going to contradict with his with Islamic beliefs, and as long as that is not going to be a prevention from these philosophers to uplift themselves spiritually more and more, and to focus on the ibadat, to focus on the worship, because ultimately it is the ibadah, it is the worship that is going to lift up the person. It is that qalb salim, it is that pure heart. And in order to keep that pure heart, doesn't come like that. You have to maintain that. And in order to maintain a pure heart, you have to be very well connected to the Islamic acts of worship, to ibadats. So now, when you're getting too much into the academia, when you're getting too much into philosophy, and you're talking about things that may completely be irrelevant, as you know, when you go to the books of philosophy, Islamic philosophy too, there would be a lot of things that scholars previously talked about, but again, they're not necessarily essential, and they're not even close to being essentials in religion. Yet the same individuals, they would be neglecting a lot of primary responsibilities, and not even fulfill them, or not even talk about essential things or topics that were relevant to the time that they lived in. So there you can see that there is a complete kind of disconnection from the reality of these individuals, and that's why he was afraid of that, and that's what he fought against. And so like I said, he wrote that book against philosophers. But again, I want to emphasize this, that he was not necessarily against philosophy, against healthy philosophy, if I may say so. he was a very well known in the field of usul as well, usul al-fiqh. This is the legal theory of the Islamic jurisprudence. And he also wrote a very famous book called Al-Mustasfa min Ilm al-Usul, which is again a book on the legal theory. He is well known in the books of fiqh as well. As I said earlier, he was a Shafi'i scholar, so that was his expertise right there in the Shafi'i school of thought. He was a mufassir. He wrote many books in tafsir. They say that he wrote also another book which has details of tafsir to such a level where if all of those books would be put into volumes, would be close to 40 volumes. So you can imagine a very, very huge collective writings on the tafsir, on the exegesis of the Quran. But unfortunately that did not survive nowadays, and many scholars, they said that's a great loss right there for not having the tafsir of Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala. He is also well known to write in the science of tasawwuf. He would be considered as a Sufi as well, somebody who was an expert and somebody who dived deep into the spiritual exercises. And as I said, he also wrote books in that subject as well. Overall, if I have to mention only one book out of all the books that he wrote, I would say that the most famous out of all of these books that he wrote is Ihya Ulumuddin. Again, Ihya Ulumuddin. It is the revival of the Islamic sciences. This book is being taught throughout the Islamic madrasas, throughout Islamic schools, and it is a very valuable book. Why? It's valuable because it goes into the details on the fiqhi, again according to the Shafi'i understanding of the legal approach, or the ahkam sharia. He would mention those things into details as an expert, as a faqih, but also at the same time he would give the inner dimensions of those rituals, something that the human being is always in need of, because we're not meant to perform only our rituals and neglect the spiritual part, or not to focus on the inner dimensions. And that's not what we see, unfortunately, nowadays. We see a lot of people who are, focused on how far above the ankles the pants reach, or how long the beard is, or what do they have on top of their head, whether they have a kufi or not. But they're not really focused on spirituality. They're not focused on these inner dimensions. And the focus on these inner dimensions cannot come or cannot be achieved unless the individual knows how to achieve those inner dimensions. So it's not like just a given feeling that you all of a sudden you know very well how to connect with your inner dimensions of your salah, for example, or sawm, fasting, or hajj, or whatever the case may be. Those are steps that every single one of us has to learn in order for you to achieve those blessings, or for you to achieve those inner dimensions. And that's what Imam Ghazali does in his book Ihya Ulumuddin. And again, Ihya Ulumuddin, beside the fact that talks about the rulings and practical acts of worship and going into the inner dimensions, also talks about other things that are very relevant to our belief. It has articles of faith, aqidah. It has, it teaches you how to prevent being a victim of Satan, how to strongly connect with Allah, how to fear Him, how to be prepared for the hereafter. And there are so many topics. I mean, the book is 4 volumes, typically. I mean, it depends how, based on the printing house, but typically it's 4 volumes in Arabic language. And 4 volumes, it was recently translated, when I say recently, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, in English language as well, by Dar al-Kutub al-Ilmiya in Beirut. I'm not a big fan of that translation, with all due respect to their hard work, but there are a lot of mistakes in that translation. So, in many translations, as a matter of fact, since it's a large work, 4 volumes, I don't know if they took the initiative to really translate them from the beginning all the way to the end. But I know that there are translations, like parts. Like, there are very famous scholars who did translate, like, let's say 100 pages talking about 2-3 different subjects. Another scholar translated another part of Ihya, talking about some other subjects, and so on. So maybe these scholars who have translated, or these professional translators, maybe they, if we put all of them together, you can be able to come up with the whole Ihya Ulumuddin. Like I said, there are some translations in the English language, but unfortunately I'm not a fan of at least 3 or 4 of those that I know personally. There might be some translations that I'm personally not aware of the complete translations, but anyways, if you have a chance, you can probably let me know too if you find something very good. I would be really interested to have that. Otherwise, I think I have like 3 different complete translations, but I'm not happy with none of them. Though they give you the essential points, and So anyways, let's move on with Imam Al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala. Imam Ghazali was also known to be somebody who passed away knowing that he was going to pass away during a certain time, but I'm going to get to that later inshallah. But first, before I get to the end of his life, I want to mention that he was an academic person. In the field of academia, he was excellent. However, he must have recognized, after 10 years teaching intensively, he must have recognized that this is not it. When I say this is not it, it means that it is important. Academia, studying, being able to understand and analyze other people's talk, other people's writings, come up maybe with something better, debates, all of that, it's excellent, but that's not it. That is for you to grow. But what ultimately grows you, it is your spiritual growth. And spiritual growth is not attained only by being a professional debater, or being a professional writer, or an analytical individual. It is achieved through you excelling in worship. That's it. When the person excels in worship, that's the time when he or she gets up high there spiritually and gets closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and ultimately benefits from what the hereafter has to offer him or her. So after 10 years, as I said, after he reached the peaks of academia and understanding and debates and teaching and all of that, he took a break. And there are details on how he appeared in front of the class and so on. Probably you may have to read a whole chapter on his life from one of the books of biography, and you will find some amazing stuff there. But after he took a break and he stopped teaching, he stopped being involved so much in academia, he left Baghdad and he traveled to Damascus, to Syria, and he served. It is well known that he was also serving in the mosque. He was literally cleaning. He was a janitor in the mosque there. And later on he moved also to Quds Sharif, to Palestine, and from there he also went to Egypt. So he visited many places, and during this time when he was visiting and sitting probably in circles of knowledge of ilm without revealing himself who he was, he just gained more and more, and he focused on the spirituality. That was his development. That was his spiritual development at that time. And a lot of scholars, they say that that's where he started excelling in Sufism as well, through that time. Later on, during this time he was still writing books, as a matter of fact. According to some, there are over 500 books that he wrote. Again, not all of them are going to be volumes and volumes of books, but some of them are going to be short, some of them are going to be long, but overall he wrote over 500 books. Now imagine, even if it's a human who's a great author nowadays still writing more than 50, as a matter of fact, that would be something like, wow, that's amazing. So we're talking about over 500. And I believe we have approximately, in one of the books that I have in front of me right here, on Imam Ghazali's life, and also goes into the book Minhaj al-Abidin, but he gives this information right at the beginning of the book. He lists here 52 of those books that are present with us nowadays, and I believe that's a number. That's how many we have in manuscripts and also published already. I believe they're all published, whatever it's in manuscripts that is known to be, at least. So I want to get back now to Imam al-Shazili. Imam al-Shazili, he's a well-known Sufi. He's a well-known scholar of Islamic sciences. He said something really amazing in regards to Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala. He said, he mentions that when he was in a state of kashf. Now when we talk about kashf, it's a very technical term for Sufis here. Kashf is exploration, or exploring something while you are in a spiritual state. Again, you're not exploring something with your eyes and seeing something physical, but it is as saying your eyes of the heart or your eyes of the spirit are exploring something new. They're found in a new place, in a new they're exposed to something new. So this is the kashf. So now Sheikh Abu al-Hasan al-Shazili rahimahullah ta'ala had this experience, this kashf, one time, and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was present there, and he says that it was also Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam who was right next to the Prophet, and it was also Sayyidina Isa, Jesus, who was right next to the Prophet alayhi salam. And he saw the blessed face of the Prophet ﷺ, and in that assembly was also present Imam Ghazali rahimahullah. In the assembly of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, while him being present, Imam Ghazali, Prophet ﷺ expressed pride of this man. So again, Prophet, according to this kashf of Abu al-Hasan al-Shazili, Prophet ﷺ expressed pride, not in front of just other ordinary people or in front of saints or sahabas, in front of the prophets, in front of Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam and Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam as well. Talking about Imam Ghazali, we can also talk about his death. I said that it's something really amazing, the way how he died, and I'm going to quote from you a few words mentioned from the beginning of the book Minhaj al-Abidin, an introduction, as a matter of fact, of one of the authors here who did the tahqiq of this book from Al-Maktab al-Asriya in Beirut, Badruddin Alawi. He says, he quotes right here, as a matter of fact, a saying from his own brother, from Imam Ahmed. Imam Ahmed al-Ghazali was also a great scholar. Sometimes we pay attention to Imam Ghazali and we don't recognize the fact that his brother was a very, very high caliber scholar as well. Not like Imam Ghazali, but definitely he was one of the big scholars of his time. So when he writes about him, he says, قال أحمد شقيق قال أحمد شقيق الإمام الغزالي لما كان يوم الاثنين وقت الصبح توضأ أخي أبو حامد وصلى ثم قال علي بالكفن فأخذه وقبله وقال سمعا وطاعة للدخول على الملك ثم مد رجليه واستقبل القبلة ومات قبل الإسفار. قدس الله روحه. So he says, his own brother says that before he passed away, it was Monday. So it was a Monday morning pretty much. And it was right at the time of Subh, of Fajr, before the sun rise. And he made wudu, he says. My brother Abu Hamid. And then after that he started, performing his prayer. And then he said, bring me the kafin, al-kafan, bring me the shroud. And when the shroud was brought to him, he took it and he kissed it. He kissed his own shroud. Now somebody will say like, whoa, what is this? Having his own shroud ready already? These are the righteous people, these are the salihin. Some of them, they would say that they would recite thousands and thousands of times the khatma of the Quran, from the beginning all the way to the end, right by the place where they were going to be buried. Some of them, they even stayed for hours and hours inside the grave where they were going to be buried. Some of them, we also know among the shuyukhs, even those who would be, wearing a traditional imama, which is wrapped with usually with a white cloth on. It used to be so thick, and that used to be their kafin on that imama. That's why sometimes we go like, what does that symbolize? And that's what it symbolizes, that their kafin, their shroud, was so close to them that they always thought that, the moment when I die, where am I going to be able to find that shroud? And it was right on their head, being wrapped around their head. So anyways, that doesn't mean that whenever you see an imam, with a white, turban, white cloth, around his head, that's his kafin. That's not. We live in different times, I believe, nowadays. But traditionally, many of these scholars, they would be carrying that. So he said, "Bring me the kafin," he said, and he kissed his kafin. And then later on, he said that. طاعة سمعا وطاعة, we obey by hearing. We hear what Allah has to say, so we obey to Him with our hearing, and also we obey to Him to enter in the presence of the king. That's what he says. In the presence of the king, he viewed the death not as something that is going to disconnect the individual from the rest of everything, but as a transition between this world and the hereafter. And when he knew that he goes through this transition, he's going to meet his Lord, and he's going to meet the king, as he says, طاعة للدخول على الملك. ثم مد رجليه, and then later on he extended his legs, and then he faced the Qibla, and then he passed away right before the sunrise, right before the morning, pretty much. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala show mercy upon his soul, and may He bless him and reward him tremendously for all of this knowledge and wisdom that he has left behind. Now, the second thing that I want to talk to you today is about introducing to you the book Minhaj al-Abidin. And today I'm not going to get into the book, going into the details, but just giving you a very simple introduction to this book. This book is not a philosophical book. This book does not reject philosophical ideas, or does not necessarily go into the kalam or into fiqh issues or complicated things that there is difference of opinions among the scholars and stuff like that. Not at all. As a matter of fact, this book, Minhaj al-Abidin, it is the last book that Imam Ghazali wrote before he passed away. What does that mean? Well, being the last book, it means that everything is gathered right here in this book. In other words, the wisdom. And if he is going to give you an advice, that is a very well weighted advice. And as a matter of fact, this book is about preparing the person to live in this world as a true believer. And it gives you the tools, and it shows you So this is what it does. It shows you the obstacles and it tells you how to overcome those obstacles. Again, if I have to wrap it in one sentence, the book Minhaj al-Abidin, The Way of the Worshippers, if we translate that in English, and there are at least 3-4 different translators that I know, one of the good translations that I would recommend everybody is the translation of Mukhtar Holland, Minhaj al-Abidin, The Way of the Worshippers, I believe it's called. I don't have that with me, but that is one of the best translations out there. So anyways, if I can wrap it up, as I said earlier, Minhaj al-Abidin, I can say that this book it shows you what the obstacles in life are and how to overcome. It gives you the tools on how to overcome all of these obstacles. So it is a very easy to read, and he himself, as a matter of fact, we're going to go through that probably later. He himself, he says, I decided to write this book in a very simple way so everybody can understand it. Because when he says, when you write about philosophy and other subjects, then only those who have gone through years of studying and dealing with those certain sciences will understand what I'm talking about. But if it is about a topic like this one, how to recognize the obstacles and overcome those obstacles, then it is something that is related to every single person, and every single person should be able to benefit from them. So I can mention to you those obstacles that he puts here. He says that there are 7 obstacles. He starts with the value of knowledge and acquaintance. So the obstacle, well, one of the translators says the value, but in reality it is the obstacle or hurdle of knowledge and acquaintance. In other words, he stresses on the importance of learning and how this knowledge is going to help you in the future. When I say help, I don't necessarily mean help you to make more money or help you to get a better job, or we're not talking about that. We're talking about a knowledge that is going to benefit you for the hereafter, right? So how to reach that knowledge and how to work with that. So how to pass this obstacle of receiving the knowledge. And also the second one is the obstacle of repentance. The third obstacle is the obstacle of preventions. The fourth obstacle is the obstacle of hindrances or resistance or delays, in life that you are faced with. The obstacle of urge, and then the obstacles of certain factors or impairments that can ruin your worship. And the obstacles of praise and gratitude as well. And these are amazing. When you go through these, you're going to see how amazingly how he wrote and how he went deep into those. I can say that this Minhaj al-Abidin was, to be honest, among the first books, not the first book, but among the first books that really helped me to grow tremendously spiritually. And that is the reason why I'm going over this book with you, and I will, inshallah, with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will be able to complete it together. نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى الخيرات وفهم الدين والحكمة، ونسأله أن يجعلنا من عباده الصالحين من الفائزين في هذه الدنيا والآخرة، ونسأله أن يحفظنا من كل مرض ومن كل مصيبة ومن كل سيئة. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from the calamities that are happening, with calamities of diseases and viruses that are being spread out there. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the right comprehension of our religion. We ask Him to make us among those who are winners in this world and in the hereafter. We ask Him to make us among those who study His religion, and through that study they grow spiritually and they get closer to Him, Ya Rabbil Alameen, because that is the main achievement right there. That is the ultimate achievement. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who are saved from the harms of this world and the hereafter as well. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Thank you all for being with me and watching this session. Inshallah, we meet again to a next session. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.